Oh my gosh, can you believe Joe Biden pardoned his son? Yes, I can believe that. I'm actually not surprised by that. And if you're surprised by that, I'm not sure if you're ready for what's coming. That's what we're going to be talking about on today's podcast. Do you have the stomach for what's coming? We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. Anyone who is watching this right now will see that it's a little bit different venue. I'm operating in my home studio today. We're going to be bringing about a completely different type of podcast, different than anything we've ever done, but it's on the behest of listeners who have asked me to do more monologuing. They've said, look, we love your interviews. We, think they're great. But we're interested in what you have to say about what's going on in the state, what's going on in the nation. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? And so we're just going to try a monologue, see how it goes. This is kind of, will also be our full first run in the home studio. It is a work in progress, but I think it looks pretty sharp. I like it a lot. And it's nice to be able to just go downstairs into the basement and start recording a podcast. So that's nice. Also, if you're watching this, that means that you like to watch podcasts, and the best place to watch podcasts, as much as I hate them, is YouTube. Well, we got back on YouTube, so we need you to go to if you just, in the search bar on YouTube, 1819 Podcast, go there and subscribe so that you're getting updates when we publish podcasts. We have to build up our subscriber base from before, we were excommunicated. And so please, go there. YouTube is just the easiest place. Everybody has the YouTube app on their phone. It's just easier. And so if you go there, subscribe to the 1819 podcast on YouTube, you will get updates and won't miss out on any content, and really do just think that's the easiest place to get it. If you're a regular audio listener, which we have tons of, just keep doing what you're doing. Not a big deal. So anyway, but that is a big change, and wanted to bring that out. But going into what we're going to be talking about today, I typically kind of my specialty, as it were, is talking about what's going on in the state. We have a very unique perspective, as we have dedicated reporters going to city council meetings and talking to people in the legislature and in Montgomery and everything else. We have a kind of an inside scoop or an inside view to what's going on in state politics. Well, the state politics news cycle right now is really boring. I think the biggest thing, today we're recording is Tuesday. You guys will be watching this Wednesday. And they'll already know, Garland Gudger, I think, is up against Steve Livingston for the Senate Pro Tem. You guys watching this probably have no idea who any of those people are or anything. I get that, but I will say, it matters. Leadership matters. This is one of the things I wrote about in my magazine. The three really important positions that we have in our state, two of which you probably don't even know who the people are, because they don't come out on the elections, is your Speaker of the House and your Senate Pro Tem. And so, Alabama, for the last, I don't know, however many years it's been since McCutcheon came in, has been plagued with Steve Raby basically running the Speaker's office as the political consultant who kind of puts his handpicked person in there. And so it was Mac McCutcheon for a number of years, and then it's now Nathaniel Ledbetter. These are the guys, basically, since they have been in power. What you've seen out of the State House has been a gas tax increase that will be perpetually going up in the future. You've seen medical marijuana legalized, and you've seen several big pushes to legalize full-on casino gambling. In the last effort that they actually did that on, they tried to include Medicaid expansion. And so this is the type of thing you're seeing is the priority in a Republican supermajority state, because you don't know who the Speaker of the House is, and we don't get to vote on that. And so these elections matter, and the Senate Pro Tem race matters, but there's not really a lot you can do about it, especially at this point. I'll be recording Tuesday, and they'll be making the decision today, and you won't see it till Wednesday. But things you should start paying attention to more, so that in the future, you'll at least know what's going on, and potentially be able to speak into the process by calling your local, your legislators from your local area. But you've got Steve Livingston versus Garland Gudger. We'll see how that goes. We'll report back and let you know. Yeah, so that's about all that's really going on in state politics right now, that's worth commenting on. I'll talk about a couple other things, then I'm just going to kind of go into something that's really been on my heart and on my mind, about doing what is necessary in order to preserve, what we have, and the chance that God has given us to be able to do that. So I'm going to touch on that. But before I do, I just want to kind of flip through some of these national, headlines that I'm seeing. I get, Tucker Carlson sends out a little, daily update. That's what he reads every morning so that he can kind of prep himself. I think the biggest thing that's just driving me crazy right now, just going to say it, is the faux outrage about Joe Biden pardoning his son. Who didn't think he was going to pardon? That's what person out there, when Joe Biden was like, no one's above the law, I'm not going to pardon my son. And you're like, I believe him. Joe Biden, he's telling, man, thank you, Joe, for doing what's right. Did anyone actually believe that when he said he wasn't going to pardon his son? Did anybody? No, I didn't. I don't know anybody who actually believed that. And so when he comes in and pardons his son, everyone's like, oh my gosh, he pardoned his son. He said he wouldn't. Joe Biden said he wouldn't, and he did. Really? Joe Biden lied, and all of a sudden you guys are surprised, and you're just like clutching your pearls and blown away that this guy, who I would argue stole an election, and is basically a geriatric dementia patient that sniffs children, and his entire career has been built on lies from the very beginning. And you're somehow surprised that he lied about pardoning his son. It's ridiculous. And every headline, Joe Biden pardons his son after he said that he wouldn't. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. I think it's clickbait. I think it's nuts. And so I guess if you're getting all worked up over that, God help you. Yeah, it sucks. And these people are criminals. Of course, that's why we had to win the election. Okay. Fair. Okay. So anyway, some more, national headlines. U.S. sending Ukraine another $725 million. There's a worthy investment. And if it's not that, they're trying to get us into World War III by shooting missiles over into Russia. It's like, what's the last ditch effort that we can just grab onto before Trump takes office? World War III. And then Russia shot some intercontinental ballistic missiles up over Ukraine that was pretty strong show of force. And everybody was like, yeah, maybe this is not such a good idea. So now they're just sending money. So I guess that's good. Let's see. It's like all the headlines are like, Democrats do Democrat things that you would expect Democrats to do. You're not going to believe it. Most national headlines. That's why I wanted to get so into what's going on in the state, because the national news cycle is just so predictable. You're not going to believe that this thing happened that you knew was going to happen. Anyway. So Senate promotes general who oversaw Afghanistan withdrawal. Okay, that's an easy one to talk about. So you've got all this controversy over Matt Gaetz being the attorney general, and he stepped out of the process. Pete Hegseth is under fire, who is the nominated Secretary of Defense, that's going to have to go through confirmation. Then you have Kash Patel that was just nominated to be the head of the FBI. I mean, all of these are going to be extremely controversial picks, and they're talking about whether the Senate is going to confirm these people. And it's like, look at the people they have in there now. There's literally a dude in a dress that was confirmed by the Senate, but we're going to have a hard time getting Kash Patel in to run the FBI. But we have a dude in a dress is the head of HHS or whatever it is, Health and Human Services, literally a dude in a dress. We're going to confirm that, but we've got some serious qualms about Pete Hegseth, really. And of course, what do? Oh, he's a rapist. He's a rapist, yeah. So we don't like this guy, so he raped somebody this one time. Yeah, and we're going to go make that happen. Kind of like Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford. You guys remember that? And man, they go all, it works, and it goes all the way back to, it's the whole being borked. It's a whole thing going back to when the radical left, Marxist, communist, godless, woke mind virus having people decades ago figured out, oh, wow, we can actually hold up some of these judicial nominations, and we can actually use this Senate confirmation stuff for. And so basically everyone who is a conservative that's a judge is now a rapist. That's kind of what they're doing. I expect that to happen as they go into these Senate confirmations on all of Trump's picks. The question is that 53 Senate seat majority Are you going to be able to keep the Murkowskis and some of these other kind of more left-leaning senators? Are they going to side with the Trump train, or are they going to go over there on the left? There's a big threat that anybody who doesn't go with Trump is going to get primaried, and they're going to have lots of money to primary these people. Well, even if you do, you've only got 2 years to get done what you need to get done. So a lot hangs in the balance on what these kind of not so right-wing senators are going to do in this confirmation process. But it just shows, Senate promotes general who oversaw the Afghanistan withdrawal. I think you guys would probably agree. The worst military display we've ever seen in our entire lives was the withdrawal out of Afghanistan, with the people like hanging onto the plane and falling off, and just the whole thing. It was just absolutely it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for our nation. And the guy who oversaw that's getting promoted by the same Senate that's going to tell you that Pete Hegseth is a rapist and shouldn't be over the Secretary of Defense. So anyway, worth noting. Let's see. They're eating the cats. Woman jailed for doing the unthinkable. Judge sentenced an Ohio woman to a year in jail Monday after she pleaded guilty to murdering and eating a cat. So they were eating the dogs and eating the cats. That actually happened. Looks like people are going to be jailed for eating the dogs and eating the cats. And so that really happened. It really did happen in Ohio. Had some Haitians here in Alabama. I don't know if there's any reports of dogs and cats missing. I don't know. But either way, again, we were told we were crazy. It's like, okay, well, maybe they're not eating the dogs and the cats, but they're killing people. They are getting in crazy car wrecks and everything else, but they're not eating the dogs and the cats. Okay, well, yeah, they were. So worth noting. So anyway, there was just a little trip through the national news cycle that wasn't Joe Biden pardoning his son. That was like the first 20 stories was that. And again, I think it's ridiculous to pay attention to that. So with that kind of response to Joe Biden pardoning his son, this faux outrage that's coming from conservatives, I get it. He's a criminal and he pardoned his son. Like it's absolutely abhorrent. It's an abuse of power. There's no honor in it. It's disgusting. It's vile. I get all of those things. But if you're really surprised and you're like, he pardoned his son, he said he wouldn't do it and he did it, I'm just, like if that is your response, I don't think you're ready for what's coming. Okay. We are up against something so much worse than a guy using his pardon powers to power his son. Okay. We're up against something a whole lot worse than that. And I alluded to this with my podcast that I did recently with Eric Metaxas. We kind of got into this conversation and I made a Lord of the Rings reference and he made a reference to a battle in the Revolutionary War, but it painted the same picture. And so on that, I being the Lord of the Rings nerd, I want to bring an example that I got out of this book. And I will tell you guys, my hope is if you listen to me on a regular basis, that some of the things I say have had an influence on you. Whether it's homeschooling your children or at least getting more involved in the discipleship of your children and not just letting the state educate them. Health, we'll talk about some health stuff in the second segment of this podcast, whatever it is. But one of the things I would just strongly encourage you to begin to do, I remember when I was a kid, I used to look at really, really big houses and see people that were successful. And I would see, kind of smaller houses that were kind of people in poverty. And I would always ask the question, what makes these people different? And again, there's people have been asking that forever, and I'm not saying that I have the answer, but one pattern that I saw in successful people as I watched, and even through my trip to prison and everything else of the people who got out and did well and people who didn't, the people who read do better. People who read do better. It's like when you exercise, like you're going to feel better because you're exercising and you're doing these things. Well, reading is exercising your brain. And so it's not only the things that you're going to learn when you read that will help you in life, just the process of reading on a regular basis helps actually shape and develop your brain and your ability to think and communicate. And so reading is good. And I would encourage you, listener, to begin reading books from the Western canon. And you can start with C.S. Lewis and the Narnia books. If you're not a real avid reader or whatever, if you have children, those are great books to sit down and read aloud with your children. The entire Narnia series from The Magician's Nephew through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian and all of that stuff. Just read those books. They're incredible books. They're part of your heritage. They're part of our culture, our Western European heritage that we have, that is what formed this country. These are some of the greatest writers of old and some of the greatest stories that have ever been told in the history of Western European Christendom. And so we'd encourage you to do that. But I want to talk a little bit about something that I learned reading The Lord of the Rings that I think is a one-to-one with what we're going through and dealing with now. And I was reading the Lord of the Rings books, and the third book, The Return of the King, maybe you've watched the movie, and they're pretty close. I think the same thing happened in the movie. There was a one-to-one of what I think we're up against at this current moment. The temptation that we're going to have to be like, oh, we won the election, and so we're just going to go back to our cubbies and stick our head like an ostrich sticking its head in the sand and just forget what's going on. Our guy won. We're good to go. Okay, that's going to be the temptation is, oh, good, our guy won. Everything's going to get fixed. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. And the one-to-one parallel for me on that is that, we won a very important battle, but the real work is yet to be done. And so to me, in the Lord of the Rings, the third book of the trilogy is The Return of the King, and kind of the climax of the book, the big part is the battle of Minas Tirith. And so Minas Tirith is the capital city of Gondor, the city of the West, and it's this castle, and the armies of Mordor have laid siege, and all the orcs and the goblins and everything are just, thousands, tens of thousands of these orcs are laying siege to this city, and it looks completely hopeless. Now, here's another point about this book, and again, as you read and learn, this battle, Tolkien, when he wrote this, he actually modeled this battle after the Battle of Vienna. And so in the book, the armies of Mordor have laid siege to Gondor and its capital city, Minas Tirith, and then Rohan comes in and saves the day. Well, what they're actually gleaning from this is in the Battle of Vienna, the Ottoman Empire, the Muslims had laid siege to the Roman Empire's city of Vienna. It was kind of a gateway to the West, if you will. And Jan Sobieski, the leader of Poland, brought in his tens of thousands of soldiers called the Winged Hussars, who came in and slaughtered all of the Muslims and saved the city of Vienna, and essentially saved Western civilization in doing so. And so this is the picture that you have in The Lord of the Rings is actually a picture of a real battle that actually happened that really did save Western civilization. That was a real thing that actually happened. And so that is really what that story is about in the book, was this battle that actually saved Western civilization. If you read Lord of the Rings, it talks about men of the West, the idea of the West. It's holding high the idea of Western civilization, even in the book through metaphor. But so they win that battle, and they didn't think they were going to win. There was no way they were going to win that battle, and they did. They were handed a victory that they didn't deserve, nor did they think they were going to get. And the temptation was to just be like, okay, we're done now. But that's not it. That's not it. Now they had to go and destroy the ring. The hard part has just begun, okay? The hard part has just begun. They still have to go and destroy the ring now. That is when things will actually get better. Sure, we had a big victory. We were able to push our enemies back, but now the actual hard work begins, okay? And I believe that's just a perfect one-to-one that you see in the book, where this big victory happened and the temptation was just to rest, but they realized, no, now we actually have an opportunity to fix what must be fixed. We have to destroy the ring, and we have an opportunity to do that now, and we're going to have to risk everything to do it, or the West will be destroyed, okay? I think that's the situation that we're in right now. We won the election, and all that did was to give us the opportunity to do what is necessary to save Western civilization. And so my question for you is, do you have the stomach for what it's going to take to save Western civilization, to save our nation? Do you have the stomach for that? Do you? Ask yourself this: if Fauci stands trial for his crimes, and I believe he will, his crimes against humanity, and he's imprisoned for life or worse, which I think is a possibility, what's your response to that going to be? I believe that justice must reign. I believe that, again, he will go through a trial. He'll go through all these things. And if it's proven that what I'm suspect that is the truth, is that his crimes against humanity, all of these people died because of his gain of function research and all these other things. If that's true and the consequences be life in prison or worse, what are we going to think? Are we like, no, we need to have mercy, or we need to, no. Things have to be done in order to set your society back on the track that it needs to be on. And I'm asking you, do you have the stomach for what it's going to take? And so beyond that, there's 25 million illegal aliens in this nation that need to be deported. That was a campaign promise. Can you imagine that? A guy got elected, not only elected, but we got a mandate. Like, he won in a landslide going around the country saying, we're going to round up the illegals and we're going to get them out. Okay. That was a campaign promise from he and Donald Trump, and JD Vance said that they were going to do this, and they won in a landslide. And so this is a campaign promise. Do you think they're just going to, just be like, oh, Trump's in. All right, I'm going back. Do you think they're just going to, go home peacefully, like in Forrest Gump when he's like, I'm pretty tired, I think I'll go home now? No, they're going to run. They're going to hide. They're going to fight to stay here. And we've got mayors of Democrat cities and sanctuary cities, which is just ridiculous, saying they're willing to go to jail to protect the illegals in their city. Was Tom Homan, the man who's going to be responsible for rounding up these illegals, says, we're happy to help him with that. Right. And so it sounds, and it certainly feels like we've got the people with the right set. Okay. The spine, the set, the demeanor, and the willingness to do this. I think my favorite Tom Homan quote, they asked him, they're like, so are you going to, when you go in and you start deporting, are you going to separate families as you do the deportation process? He said, absolutely not. We're going to go in and deport all of them. I thought that was fantastic. So anyway, I believe Trump is assembling the team to do what's necessary. But my question to you is, do you have the stomach? Do you have the stomach to sit and watch what's going to be done? Or even if we're called to participate in it, do you have the stomach for that? Are you willing to do what's necessary to save your nation? It's a question we all need to ponder. So, do we have the will to wield power for good? Conservatives are always like, well, we've got power now, but if we use it, then when the left gets it, they'll use it. Okay. Well, the left has been using it. Okay. And every time we get power, we're like, oh, we're not like them. We're not going to do that. We're just going to hold on to this power and like reach across the aisle and see if we can work with Democrats. That's how we got here, people. Okay. This myth of neutrality, that there is no good and evil in government, we've seen the wheels completely fall off of that. Okay. There is objective good and there is objective evil, and we are objectively good going up against what is objectively evil. And we need to know that, and we need to take the power that has been entrusted to us by the people of this nation through our system of government, and we need to put people in positions of power that are going to wield that power and authority for what is objectively good and do what is objectively necessary to preserve what is good, true, and beautiful. This nation, this land, it's going to require work, and we need to put people in there who can do this, and then we need to support them when they do it, no matter how ugly it gets. When most people think of illegals, we think of a mix of some crime and mainly Hispanic people who are just trying to earn a living, okay? Well, don't forget that Minneapolis has been completely overran by Somalis and Muslim people, many of whom have zero respect for human life, the law, or our civilization. So again, we're like, oh yeah, there's that guy, he's a roofer and he's here illegally, and I think his cousin's a drug dealer. Okay, they got to go too, but think about that in Minneapolis. Like, it's literally like Mogadishu up there, okay? Completely overran by violent Somalis that have, I don't know how this has happened, but it has. And those are people that you're going to have to round up. Think about the Venezuelan gangs that have taken over apartment complexes. It's go time for them, okay? And we're going to have to go in there and set that situation right. Do we have the stomach to go in and set that situation right? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be ugly, but it needs to be done. We have to do what's necessary, okay? And then, of course, my favorite local Alabama story, Jose Pascual Reyes, that we still don't know what the heck is going on with him in his criminal proceedings, but this is a guy who had a relationship with a woman who had 2 children. He ends up killing her and her son and chopping them into pieces and putting them in a suitcase, and then pouring a concrete slab, basically turned the woman and her son into a back patio. And then the 12-year-old girl he tied to a bed and did God knows what to her. And she was tied to the bed. He went to work and she chewed through the restraints and left and was walking down the road in a t-shirt, and someone saw her and asked what happened. And she, the cops came and they brought him back, and she said, my mom and my brother are in that concrete there. They were chopped into pieces and put in a suitcase, and I had to watch. Okay. So those people, okay, that's what we're up against. It's going to be ugly, but do you have the stomach for it? Do you have the stomach to destroy the ring, to keep that metaphor going? Okay. So our nation has an ideological sickness that is like gangrene and has been festering and spreading for too long. If we would have taken care of it 25 years ago, it would have been a painful but pretty straightforward operation, to use surgical terms. Now that we've let it fester for decades, it is going to resemble an emergency amputation, and it's going to be nasty, okay? Because we've let this sickness, this woke ideology, and this absolute abandonment and departure from what is objectively true, because we've let that fester and reign in our institutions and in our government and in all these systems of what make things what they are, because we've refused to stand up to it, it has spread and infected what could potentially be a critical mass of our body as a nation. But we have one last chance to go and cut this out. We have one last chance to cut this out, and it's going to be like gangrene. And because we've let it fester for so long, it's going to be nasty. Okay. It's going to be real nasty, but we've got to do it if we hope to survive. Do we want our nation to survive? Do we believe that America is the greatest nation on the planet? Do we believe that Western civilization is the greatest civilization that's ever existed on the earth? Do we believe that? And if so, are we going to do what's necessary to preserve it? So, they're not going to go down without a fight. As we've seen, their style of fighting is often subversion. So there will be a clashing, I think, specifically in the deportation process. There may be some Antifa stuff in the streets, but like, honestly, who's really scared of Antifa? Like, you notice there's never any Antifa outbreaks in like Alabama. Yeah, one idiot went and tried to blow up the attorney general's office, but there was the Antifa thing that I'm talking about. You see there's like parade type settings or like marches of Antifa soldiers with their masks on, and they're like threatening people. That doesn't happen in Alabama because, like, quite frankly, all my friends in Alabama are like, God, I hope they come here. There'd be a lot of fun had in Alabama by removing them physically, right? There's not a lot of Antifa outbreaks here, but there are some places and cities where that type of stuff works. I don't think it's going to work anymore. I think people are done being scared of that. So what we're going to be up against is subversion. Okay. People are going to subvert, these people are going to continue trying to infect our institutions, and it will never be head to head. It's going to be end arounds that we see. Trying to snuff them out is like trying to play whack-a-mole. Okay. It's like trying to play whack-a-mole. Think of the Common Core battle, or our efforts to craft legislation that bans divisive concepts. And so you're like, oh, well, you can't teach DEI. They're like, oh, okay. So they just rename what we would call DEI or divisive concepts. They'll just rename it and continue to teach. And so you got to pound out legislation that's like, specifically, you cannot make people do gender pronouns, and you can't, do anything that's based on race or this. It has to, and like, you spend all this legislation, and then they look at the legislation and they just figure out how to do their subversion in a way that matches, the book, if that makes sense. So, they just rename what they're doing, and they keep going. They have no intent of stopping what they're doing. They have no respect for the law or the wishes of decent working class people. They want to destroy Western civilization and everything that is good, true, and beautiful. They hate Christ and want to erase his rule and existence from this earth and all of creation, and they will stop at nothing until they've done so. So it kind of reminds me of a story we broke not too long ago, kind of recently. Hopefully you guys are readers and you get the newsletter. Make sure you go and subscribe to the newsletter so that you're not missing out on any of these stories and all the other stories that we break and cover in the state. But in Auburn, and I always tell people, Auburn's a good school. Okay. You start to kind of criticize the public school system, and they're like, oh, my kids go to Auburn or Mountain Brook. It's a good school. That doesn't happen at the good schools. Yes, it does. Okay. It happens at all the schools. We all know that. Okay. But whatever. Okay, so your kids go to the good schools like Auburn. Okay, well, let me tell you about Drake Middle School in Auburn and a story that we broke there. We had got a report that there was a Drake Middle School teacher who was a music teacher who's just a flaming homosexual, like an in-your-face, I'm here and I'm queer, I'm gay and I'm here to stay. Just, it was like the captain of the drag queen team in Auburn. I don't even know what that is. I don't know, but just an out there, like, I'm a faux show homosexual and I'm rubbing it in your face. And they're like, oh, you know what? We should give him a job with children. Why is that? Like, why can you have that lifestyle and get a job around children? But if anyone else had like a divergent lifestyle that would be considered not socially acceptable, they would never get that. Like if someone was, walking around with a brown shirt and a Nazi thing, throwing up Hail Hitlers, walking down the street on their spare time, like, you know what? We need to make him a teacher. Like no one would do that. Okay. So why is it when you have just an out there in your face flaming homosexual, you're like, you know what? Teacher, that guy is teacher material. Why do we do that? Why do we let that happen? And then when the consequences come, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised that he was doing stuff with the kids. Why? We know what they're doing, but we let it happen and then we act surprised. And the acting surprised, I think, is to like get off the accountability, like to run from the accountability of us letting this guy who's a pervert around children. And then when the pervert does perverted things to the children, then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised. I had no idea. I thought he had boundaries. Really? You thought he had boundaries? Again, we're operating in crazy world. Okay. It's clown world that we're operating in. And again, thanks to 1819, kind of promote myself. Don't mind if I do, in our team, but, we're starting to see some of these things and we're uncovering it. And so this drag queen, just in your face homosexual, is a music teacher at Auburn, a good school. And, he knows that he's not allowed to talk to the children about his lifestyle in the classroom. So he says, I know, I'll create a podcast and make sure that the kids are listening to the podcast that I produce, okay, on their phones that they all have. And I'll make sure they're following me on social media and that they've got my Instagram page. And on the Instagram page, he's getting lap dances from gay dudes in a thong, okay? And in the podcast that he's producing, he's literally telling children, F your parents, question your gender, okay? If you want to explore your sexuality, you do it. You go, girl. You go, boy, okay? Doing that, okay, on these podcasts. And so we catch wind of it and we do all the research, prove that it's true, and we publish the story at 2 p.m. that day. He resigned at 4 p.m. that day. And so it's like, oh, clap, clap, applause. We got rid of him. Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's good. But here's the part that really just infuriated me. Okay. And the point of the story is to show you how pervasive and persistent these people are and why it's like playing whack-a-mole. We had a parent call us the day after the teacher resigned. We had a parent call us and say, hey, we're so happy you published the story and we're thankful that he resigned. But for the last 2 years, we've taken that same information that was in the story and worse to the superintendent, to the principal, to the Board of Education. We've taken that same information. In the last meeting, the lady said, the last meeting I had, I was on my knees with tears coming down my face, begging them to do something about him because we knew what he was doing. And they said there was nothing they could do, nothing they could do. That is your education apparatus in the state, by the way, looking out for the safety and well-being of your children. Sorry, nothing we can do. Yeah, your kid's getting groomed. That's unfortunate. He didn't have sex with him. I mean, I don't know what you want from us. That's the response from your education apparatus. And so I guess here's where I promote homeschooling, by the way. Get your kids out of the public education system. But anyway, so the point of this, though, okay, is the whack-a-mole. So let me keep going here. It gets worse. And so then we come to find out this fella, the Drake Middle School teacher, there's, the music teacher, he resigns. Well, boop, whack-a-mole pops back up. And he's at the University of Auburn teaching now. It's like on a contract basis. He's like a life coach. Well, what is he life coaching? Like how to be a drag queen? Like, what is this? Oh no. He's helping special needs children at Auburn. Auburn's like one of the few Division I kind of big universities that actually has programs for autistic children and things like that to kind of help them develop, or kind of maybe the more functioning side of autism that kind of helps them go out and be able to develop. And where do they place this guy? There, with the most vulnerable people at the college. We'll put him there. The pervert, that's where he belongs, with the vulnerable kids, students. Really? No. And so we wrote that story. And so I'm not sure if he's still there or not. Don't know what the response is going to be, but let me tell you a story that absolutely broke my heart, that I was not anticipating. So I called one of my friends that morning after that story broke, not even calling him about the story. And I said, hey man, what's going on? He goes, I'm just reading the newsletter and I'm reading the story about this pervert teaching at Auburn University. And he says, Bryan, I mean, I'm broken. My heart's broke. My wife is on the couch crying because we have a daughter who's 17 and has autism. And the only place that we found in the nation that we could send her to get the help and development and training that we thought she needed was Auburn University. And now we can't send her there because they're putting perverts around them. Okay. That is what's going on in the education apparatus right here in Ruby Red, Alabama, folks. That is what we're up against. This pervasiveness, this whack-a-mole nature of what it is that we're trying to snuff out is going to have to be removed like gangrene, okay? From our military, from our institutions, from all of these things, and it's not going to be pretty. Vigilance is what it's going to take to get our nation back, because they will not stop until we make them, okay? So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. We're going to hit a commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk about the important subject of health. So check out this commercial, and we'll be back. If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Brian.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. All right, guys, welcome back to our inaugural monologue from Bryan Dawson. Hopefully you're enjoying it. I am enjoying it. Maybe I might start doing this all the time now. I just sit in a room by myself in my basement and ramble into a camera and hope someone listens and enjoys. So hopefully you're listening, and I hope you enjoy. So anyway, one of the things I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I knew I wanted to kind of talk about some current events. I think what I said in that first segment, I think is, I think it's very pertinent, okay, to what we're dealing with and what we're going to walk into. And another subject that's just been an absolute life changer for me has been the subject of health, and the reason Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been placed over HHS. So you're going from Rachel. I don't know what Rachel's real name is because it's a man with a penis. Okay. It's not Rachel. I don't call Bruce Jenner Caitlyn Jenner. I call Bruce Jenner Bruce because Bruce has a penis and he's a man. I don't play that game. But I don't know Rachel Levine's name, so Admiral Levine, I guess. I don't know, but it's a man with a penis and a dress. That is the head of HHS, and now we're going to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's like 70 and absolutely jacked and has been uncovering all of the stuff that's been going on in our food and in our health and in vaccines and everything else. So needless to say, I'm excited about that. And so, and of course, he'll have a problem getting confirmed in the Senate. Admiral Levine with the penis and the dress, you're good. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., yeah, we're not so sure that we're going to be all confirmed, Anyway, this is the ridiculousness of what we're up against. Again, we get it. We know. So moving forward on the subject of health. Okay, so I had like a life-changing epiphany I want to share with you. A life-changing epiphany, okay? I watched, and I find myself often watching, the Tucker Carlson. What an amazing thing that he's been freed, by the way, guys. I mean, what a gift from God that Elon Musk bought Twitter, that Fox fired Tucker, and that Tucker went on Twitter, and then now Tucker's got his own network, Tucker Carlson Network. I encourage you guys to go be a part of that and subscribe and support him financially and watch his stuff. I mean, he's got some of the most incredible things that you need to be hearing about, and I want to talk to you guys about an episode that he did with Casey and Callie Means. Okay. And let me just kind of tell you a little bit about them, who they are, the book that they wrote. The book is called Good Energy. Would encourage you to get the book Good Energy. But they go into, and so Casey and Callie Means, I forget which one's which, because it's a brother and a sister. And I think Casey is the sister, and I think Callie is the brother. Pretty sure that's what it is, and we'll just operate on that. But the brother was a lobbyist for Big Pharma, and he was a lobbyist for Big Food. He was a lobbyist at Coca-Cola, and I think he was a lobbyist at some pharmaceutical company. I don't remember which one it was, but he was for sure a lobbyist at Coca-Cola. So he worked at one of the big food corporations as a lobbyist, and he saw what was going on kind of behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and he became a whistleblower. Well, meanwhile, his sister is one of the top ear, nose, and throat surgeons in the country. She's Stanford trained, Stanford educated, top of her class, making buku money at the peak of her career, and she sees how messed up the medical system and the pharmaceutical system and everything is, and she walks away in the peak of her career. And they basically become whistleblowers and health evangelists and have gone on to write this book, and they're going on these podcasts. And I'm telling you guys, this episode with them on Tucker Carlson, I forget the name of it. I'll try to link it in the show notes if I remember. But it's just a phenomenal episode. It's like basically how Big Pharma is trying to keep you sick, I think was the name of it. So if you go on and YouTube and look for it. But Casey and Callie Means, the thing that really just clicked in my head was, the brother, I think Callie Means, told a story. He said this, he says, okay, Philip Morris and RJ Reynolds were the big tobacco companies. Okay. They're the big tobacco companies. And pre-1997, I think it was, when the huge lawsuit came out and they had to issue all this money to victims or whatever, and they had to put the Surgeon General's warnings on all of their products, and they could no longer market the way that they were marketing. And so essentially putting their big giant, money grab to bed. Prior to that, though, they had the smartest and most talented scientists in the world working to make cigarettes as addicting as possible, dumped millions into research and development to make cigarettes as addicting as possible. And that's why they say when you're trying to get off of cigarettes, it's like trying to get off of heroin. You smoke cigars or something like that does not have those same addictive agents, because it's not the cigarette that was designed by scientists to be as addicting as possible. So they had the best scientists in the world working to make cigarettes as addicting as possible. They had the most talented and well-funded marketing teams in the world working to make cigarettes as appealing to possible to the youngest possible person. Okay. Their marketing dollars were trying to get children addicted to cigarettes, essentially. Okay. And that was their plan, or at least they wanted lifetime customers. Okay. And then they had the most powerful lobbyists in the world working for them, making sure that the USDA and the FDA and these other government entities didn't interfere with what they were doing. So the most powerful scientists working to make it as addicting as possible, the most powerful, and most talented marketing team to make cigarettes as appealing as possible, with the lobbyists working to keep the government out of their money grab. Okay. Well, what's interesting about that is that after that lawsuit happened and they had to issue all that money and they couldn't market the way they were, and they had the Surgeon General's warnings and all that, when that happened, the next day, RJ Reynolds and Philip Morris, according to Callie Means, bought Nestle, Nabisco, Kraft, and these other food companies that specialize in ultra-processed foods. And those same scientists that were working to make cigarettes as addicting as possible were now working around the clock, the same exact scientists, to make ultra-processed foods as addicting as possible. Everything to the taste, to the crunch when you bite into an Oreo or a Dorito, okay? The crunch, the taste, the texture, all of it is scientifically designed to give you a dopamine release, because they want you to be addicted to these ultra-processed foods that are actually horrible for you. So the scientists work to make them as addicting as possible. The same marketing team that was working to make cigarettes as appealing as possible are now working to make ultra-processed foods as appealing as possible in commercials, and specifically targeting, just like they were with cigarettes, the youngest possible customer. And then they have the most powerful lobbyists in the world now in DC trying to keep the government out of what it is that they're doing. And so think about that, but if that wasn't insidious enough, and it's actually, Casey and Callie Means said, we would be healthier if those companies would just go back to making cigarettes, because what's happened is the big food is getting people addicted to these horrible ultra processed foods. and they're working hand in glove with big pharma. They're essentially creating diabetes patients and pharmaceutical lifetime customers. Okay. And so what's happening with these ultra processed foods is you eat them. They're made to be incredibly addicting. As I said, down to the crunch and the texture, everything is designed to give you a dopamine release. And then our bodies have what's called a satiety mechanism. Okay. So when we're eating normal, natural food, a hormone is released that tells our brain that we're full. When you're eating these ultra processed foods that are scientifically designed to make you fat from the dopamine release and the addiction, it actually hijacks that satiety mechanism and shields it so that your body or your brain doesn't know that you're full. And so rather than having a few Oreos, you eat the whole flipping box. Guilty. Okay, done that. But that's because this food is designed to be giving you a dopamine release to block your satiety mechanism so you can eat as much of it as possible. And you just eat and eat and eat. And all of a sudden, you're storing thousands of calories that you otherwise would not have been eating and tons of sugar, and you get fatter and fatter. So big food industry is working hand in glove with the pharma companies by creating chronic health issues that pharmaceutical companies can fix with their product. Obesity and diabetes rates are skyrocketing, even in children. Childhood diabetes and obesity didn't exist 20 years ago. Now they're commonplace. And I would argue that the goal is a diabetic child. Like, that's the goal for these, for this money grab, is that way you have a lifetime customer. Okay. That if you can get this child obese, sick, unhealthy, going into the doctor all the time with all these different infections because his entire sustenance is based on these seed oils and all these ultra processed foods that there's no nutrition in, and that's what they're eating from Cheez-Its and chicken nuggets and fish sticks and McDonald's and all this other stuff. They're pumping their bodies full of that. Of course they're going to be sick, and the pharmaceutical companies are there to help. Okay. And so they're creating lifetime patients of metformin, statins, and now Ozempic. Okay. And so pharma is now pushing to get Medicaid to cover Ozempic for children. So this is a really interesting one. Pharma is now pushing to get Medicaid to cover Ozempic. So they have the most powerful lobbyist in the country working to get Medicaid to cover Ozempic. Okay, so what does that mean? It means, oh no, we have an epidemic of fat children. Whatever shall we do? Well, most of them are poor, so the government needs to pay for them to get the shot that will help them not be fat. So we make the kids fat. We lobby, so we create the problem. Then we lobby the government to pay for our solution to fix the kids that we made fat. We've got a thing that can fix that. You see this? So we make the kids fat, and then we sell them the thing that'll help them with the problems of being fat, and we make the government pay for it because we've got lobbyists, and it's just a giant cash grab. Okay. And it's not just children. We're all subject to this. Okay. Obesity, morbid obesity, and diabetes are on the rise in everyone, not just children. Okay. But think about how wicked that is. You create an epidemic of childhood obesity and diabetes, then lobby the government to pay for the drug you produce that can fix it. Okay. This will be the biggest cash grab probably done. Well, maybe we're just talking about Ukraine. Maybe not that level, epic proportion of money laundering and cash grabbing, but on that level, they're treating us like cattle. Okay. And once you realize that, it changes you. Once you understand how insidious this system and this process is and what it's doing to you, it should forever change you. Okay. They treat us like cattle. So my wife has been telling me about all this since we got married, but for whatever reason, I didn't sink in until I saw this podcast with Casey and Callie Means on Tucker Carlson. It didn't sink in. My wife's been telling me about the ultra processed foods. Don't shop on the inside of the grocery store. Go to the outside because that's where the freezers and the refrigerators are, and that's where you're going to find your fresh food. Don't eat ultra processed foods. That stuff is disgusting. It's going to kill you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, whatever. Ignored her. And this is my apology to my wife, by the way. She was right. I was wrong. But so my wife has been telling me about this stuff for over 10 years. And I mean, I kind of knew it, but I didn't understand quite how bad it was. There was something about the way that they communicated this in the podcast that just flipped a switch in my mind. Okay. And so, the way that their intention, the the intentionality behind it and the profit behind what they're doing made me realize that to eat the ultra processed foods and sugars is to be a slave to what they are doing. So I stopped eating all of it. Okay. I haven't eaten a processed food or a processed sugar in months. I walk into the gas station. I travel the roads like a madman. I'm driving all over the place. And I used to go into like a Quick Trip or a gas station and just grab something off the shelf, get one of those taquitos or something off the thing. And it's just like, no, that's literally poison. Okay. It's poison that's going to make me fat and make me sick. And I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to. And so I've had this thing that's just shifted in my mind about this. So I stopped eating all of it. And so basically if it comes in a package, I don't eat it. If I can't kill it or grow it, I don't eat it. Milk, butter, meat, eggs, cheese, vegetables, and fruit. That's it. So meat, milk, butter, eggs, cheese, vegetables, and fruit. That is the 95% of what I eat. That's it. I haven't had a processed food out of a package in months, and I've lost over 30 pounds, and I've never felt better. I'm not selling you anything. I don't have a product to sell. I'm just telling you this was a life-changing thing for me when I saw this podcast with them. And it just clicked something in my head where I'm like, oh my gosh, look at what they're doing. I can't be part of this. I'm not going to allow I'm not going to be subjected to this. And I'm not going to let my children be subjected to this. Okay. My children are actually healthier now. I mean, they run around, they play all the time and have fat children. But they were chubbier than they are now since we pulled them off of the sugars and the sugary cereals and the Fruit Loops and the Cocoa Puffs and all that stuff. You're basically just like diabetes with some milk on it. Okay. That's what sugary cereals are in the morning. And we're just giving it to our children. Okay. It's crazy. Once you see it, it's like everything else. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then it forces you to do something. And the reason most people don't see it is because they don't want to see it. Because they know if they see it, they'll have to do something and they don't want to. Okay. So all keto and carnivore really is getting away from processed foods and sugars. So I think that's it. So if you're talking about keto, talk about carnivore. Is it about getting in keto? I don't know about the ketosis thing. I don't know about all that. What it all boils down to is to lose weight, you have to eat less calories, than you burn every day. You have to have a caloric deficit. And if you're eating all kinds of junk food that is empty calories and everything else that's just pumped into it, and you're getting a dopamine drip from what you're eating, and your satiety mechanism is being interfered with, you're just going to keep eating, and you're going to have thousands and thousands of calories, and you're just going to get fatter and fatter and fatter. Okay. And so you have to interrupt that pattern, if you're going to lose weight. Okay. And so, another interesting health stat that is alarming and shows another epidemic, and it's completely connected to what I just described. Okay. And it's showing just the rampant effect of this stuff on the health of the citizens of our country. A lot of this stuff is illegal in foreign countries, by the way, but it's not here because of the lobbying apparatuses that they have in Washington, D.C. But another interesting health stat that is alarming and shows another epidemic is the connection of sleep apnea and low testosterone, low T, and how mild to morbid obesity fuels it. Okay. So the cycle is this: you start to eat the American diet and you're not in gym class. You're not playing football anymore. You get to be about, 28 to 30, somewhere in that range. You're not going to the gym. You're not playing football. You're not playing baseball. You're not doing the sports. You don't have that same thing. You're not burning calories at that level. You're a little bit more sedentary. You're eating the normal American diet, probably hitting a little more fast food than you should. And you put on 20, 30 extra pounds, and you're not morbidly obese, but you're certainly a little heavier than you were. Well, what happens when you get a little bit heavier than you are, specifically for men, this is with men, you become heavy and your mouth gets fatter, your tongue gets fatter, your throat has fat in it. And when you lay down to sleep, your chest will actually compress down on your windpipe. And so if you snore, okay, you probably have sleep apnea. And you'll notice the heavier you are, the more you snore, because what's happening is all of that weight and everything when you go to sleep relaxes on your windpipe and it prevents you from being able to breathe. And so you're waking up over and over and over throughout the night. And if you keep waking up over and over throughout the night, you don't get REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. You don't get REM sleep. And if you don't get REM sleep, all other kind of host of problems happen. But one of the things that happens during REM sleep, men, is that's when your body produces testosterone, is in REM sleep. And so if you've gotten a little bit fat and you've developed sleep apnea, you're now not getting REM sleep. And if you're not getting REM sleep, your body's not producing testosterone and you're going to have low T. And so the combination of low testosterone and just lack of good quality sleep is going to make you lethargic. Okay. And if you're lethargic, you're going to be more sedentary, and you become more sedentary and you begin to eat more food and you get fatter and your sleep apnea gets worse, which means you get even less REM sleep, which means your body's producing even less testosterone, and on the cycle goes. This happened to me. That's how I know. It got to the point where I'm trying to be a husband and a father. And I'm not like crazy fat, but I was heavy and I had sleep apnea. I went and got a sleep test done and I had 134 apneas an hour. It was like the worst they'd ever seen. And so I was not sleeping. I was not producing testosterone. I was not, I was, and I could just sit on the couch and think about all the things that needed to be done. And it was just overwhelming, and I didn't do anything. I wasn't playing with my kids. I wasn't going and doing things with my wife. I just didn't want to do anything, and I wasn't as effective at work as I was, before I interrupted this cycle. And so my point in saying all this is we see what the American diet is producing, and here's some of the downstream effects of it. And so you talk about being, military readiness. We got a bunch of, even mildly obese men who have sleep apnea and low testosterone is not exactly a great defense for the nation. And, you're hearing, all this stuff about, we're going to have to draft our daughters if we go to war with China or whatever. Well, one of the things they're saying is it's like, well, all the men are fat. Like, they're eating this food. They don't have PE class in school anymore. It's an epidemic of obesity, and we've just become fat and lazy. And, but again, if you're overweight, I am too. I'm less overweight than I was. I'm not criticizing you. I'm saying you have to know what's going on so that you can take responsibility for your health and take it back. Okay. You have to take it back. You have to take responsibility for your health. So to a certain degree, it's like anything else. When this is being foisted upon you and you're just going and doing what everyone does and you're eating the American diet, living the American life, and you're getting fat, I'm not fat shaming you for that, but I am saying you have a responsibility now that you know, and if you've listened to this, now you have to interrupt that pattern. And the good thing is if you stop eating the ultra processed foods and sugars for like 10 days, all the cravings and everything go away, and you actually feel better than you've ever felt. And then you're like, why was I not doing this? And so I would encourage you to do that. Because again, we need to be better. We need to be better husbands. We need to be better fathers. Women, you need to be, in the home or whatever it is that you're doing. If we're eating and we're healthy, if we're eating correctly and we're eating right, we're healthy, we're going to be better at whatever it is that we are tasked to do and whatever God has given us to do. So, I think that's important. And this is just a life-changing thing I'm sharing with you guys. I don't really have any motivation in it other than it was extremely interesting to me, and it's radically changed my life. So I'm sharing it with you. So in this horrible culture, it almost seems like we have to swim upstream and against the grain in every aspect of our lives. And now I'm just talking about the health aspects. So if you go with the flow, you will be fat. Like if you go with the flow, the chances are you're probably going to lose your children. Oh, well, everybody sends their kids to public schools. Everybody, it's just what we do. My kids go to the good schools. Okay. If we just go with the flow and we don't begin to swim upstream in this culture of death that we live in, we're not going to be happy with the results that we get. And then we're going to try and blame something else. Well, I'm telling you, it's your responsibility. Okay. It's your job to take responsibility for your health, your children, your life, every aspect of it. Okay. And so if we find ourselves doing what is normal for the majority of Americans, we can almost guarantee that it will be moving us in a negative direction. Think about this. Public school children on the standard American diet, watching worldly content on their cell phones, doesn't make for soldiers that will save the West. Okay. And so I'm going a bit farther here, and I'm telling you guys, I think we have a responsibility to the next generation to help them resist that. Now that we've identified that there's all these forces working against us being productive, fruitful, healthy members of society, there's all these forces working against us. You have a responsibility to not only intervene for yourself, but to help your children with it as well. Think about that. Public school children on the standard American diet, watching worldly content on their cell phones, doesn't make for soldiers that will save the West. And if you think that's a good pattern for getting your children into the kingdom, everyone's worried about whether their kids are going to be saved or not. And then that's the pattern that you're doing with your children. And, don't be surprised when the results aren't what you want. Okay. I hear it, kill the messenger. Here I am. I know. But I feel it, necessary to tell you. These are things that I've seen, and changes that I've made in my life, and it's been really hard, but I can't even begin to tell you how rewarding it's been. So, swim against the current modern culture or be washed away into a sea of hopelessness. Okay. That's my final thought. Swim against the current of modern culture or be washed away into a sea of hopelessness. All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for this week, guys. Thank you for tuning in to my inaugural monologue. There's a lot of logs in there. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Send me an email, Bryan, Bryan .Dawson, DAWSON, Bryan.Dawson at 1819news.com. Send me an email. Tell me what you think of the monologue. Would you like me to do this more? Tell me if it absolutely sucked. Did I hurt your feelings? Any of those things, let me know. Would love to hear your feedback if this is the type of podcast that you would like to see me doing more. All right, so that'll wrap it up. Till next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.